Dr. Kahlon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Emil.
It's great to see you, great to meet you. So you have several different positions and kind of at least wear different hats at the UT. You are an associate professor at the Department of Population Health. You're the vice dean of Health Ecosystem, and you're the founding director of Factor Health, correct?
That's
right.
That's
great. Sounds like you're busy, and I look forward to hearing about it. And let's start here about it with the first question, which is in 2 minutes or less. Tell us about your professional story, your career journey. How did you get to be where you are today professionally?
2 minutes or less is definitely going to be a record, but I'll try it. And so here it is. So I think there are two lines to this story. One is something that feels a little bit more random. I've done a lot of different things in my life. Some of it is because of necessity. I'm an immigrant, a privileged immigrant, but still coming to America was loomed large in my mind. And so I made decisions to make sure that I could, in fact, come here and embrace this new world. But through that, I would say I've focused on creating value wherever I was at. It's very simple in some ways. And so that took me from a graduate degree in neuroscience to working in the tech industry in Silicon Valley to working in social change organizations, and then back to academic medicine to really use all of those skills to help change and improve the health system. More recently, I would say, if I look back in the last many years, as I've come here to Austin, I think there's a much more deliberate story that is about finding my core purpose and leveraging all of these experiences, but now in the service of health for all, with with a lens around making sure that when we say for all, it really is for all. So two very different stories. One in many different industries, and more recently something where I have really focused on purpose, and I believe that's served me, and I hope others well.
Good. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. This is maybe a little tricky question, but what do you suspect or know bothers other people about you as a leader, or if you'd rather, what is your leadership weakness?
I think there are two things. The first, the most obvious is, and this is going to be ironic because I'm going to talk about empathy later on, is my lack of empathy in many more sort of in cases where leadership also required management and required sort of the tactical pieces of achieving big dreams. And so what does that mean? That means really understanding where the people that come join me in a journey, or I join them, really understanding where they are coming from and what success looks like to them, and the reality that everybody's notion of success, personal and larger, is never going to be exactly the same as mine. And so I think that really has been my Achilles heel. I think it has not served me or others well, and it's been a lifelong journey to really push myself to a place where that empathetic understanding of the others that I'm walking with, that are walking with me, and a better empathetic understanding of their starting points. So I think that's been one big one. I think the second one that people close to me will fault me for is just not understanding when I have leadership and power and not leveraging that to the max. And it is a critique that some close friends of mine have called me on. And I hope that I am now in a better place and they'll give me a better grade as I move ahead. But that has been a few surprising moments that people close to me have called me on to say, no, actually, you have all the power you need. You're just not leveraging it to the fullest
Interesting.
extent.
Those are two really vulnerable answers. I appreciate that. The empathy one, I think, is interesting because I feel that often leaders in particular don't realize that empathy takes effort. They sort of feel like it's one or the other, either you're empathetic or you're not, but it's hard. It's often very hard.
it's extremely hard to be empathetic in the moments that really matter close to you. I think there are other parts of empathy that I believe that I'm able to do. It's usually further from me, broader, but it's the empathy you need to the people closest to you to really, make large scale impact, which is my purpose as a leader. As a shortcut to that. That's to me it is really hard work. It's about making sure that you don't put yourself front and center.
Mm-hmm.
Actively make yourself a little bit smaller so you can make others' interests and starting points bigger.
Hmm. The other point about not exercising or leveraging your power, that also, I don't hear that very often. It's usually the opposite, where people, or at least anecdotes about leaders who are sort of abusing or taking advantage of their power. But I think that we see that all the time in other people, where they don't realize that they have an ability to take action here that they're not taking advantage of. So that's a good, important point too. What does leadership mean to you?
Well, the stage that I'm in, I think leadership to me is first doing right by the people around you, the one that I give myself the poorest grade on, because you want to walk the talk, and the hardest walking of any talk is to the people around you. But then leadership is understanding in each one of our unique positions. And we all have this. Somewhere we have unique privilege and power. And for me, it is the pursuit of a better world for everyone. I know that sounds really flippant, but it's not. I mean it very deeply. But the way you become a leader in my mind is you realize the strengths you have, the positions you have to make real, actionable, measurable change and impact. And I think if one can just be clear, and we're going to come back to me, clarity is at the heart of this, to be really clear about what drives oneself, what change looks like, and then share that empathetically in these circles around you. You can provide your piece to leadership. Right. Mm-hmm. I say that because everybody is a leader. You can provide your bit in leading towards the change that is needed.
That's something that I try and promote a lot, this idea of just finding your role as a leader. And often when we talk about leadership, or have courses or any learning event, we talk about leadership. It's very it tends to be exclusionary or elitist. And it's really important that we're more inclusive about understanding that just because you're not in a leadership position doesn't mean you're not a leader. And with that, that's a good diving off point to actually start about talking about purpose-driven leadership. So what is it, just on a sort of superficial level? What's the basic concept?
To me, and this is my take on this, is very practical. It's not anchored in theory. But I think one goes back to theory then to sort of bolster these ideas. But mm-hmm. it has been my saving. Purpose has saved me. Purpose has helped me leverage what power I have to do better things. And so when I say purpose-driven leadership, I mean using purpose to anchor and guide, and to pave the path. In finding purpose and getting clearer and clearer about it, it actually makes the work that you want to do easier. And so when I say purpose-driven leadership, I mean it in some ways in a very small way, small but powerful. And by small, I mean focusing on clarity, understanding, and authenticity with yourself. Why are you doing what you're doing? Or why do you want to do what you think you want to do? And then being true to that. And if you can find a way to say, I'm doing these things because I care about XYZ, and that is what you say to people around you, and then your work actually reflects that. That is beautiful. That gives you joy. That will give you the strength you need to continue to do it. But this is why I say it's about being small, because it's some very specific things that you align in order to create, I believe, the largest impact possible. And be okay with yourself in doing it. I mean, in the end, we have to live our lives. And if we're not in a good place, nobody around us is in a good place. So it's a way of creating impact in my mind that also nourishes one's own soul and the people around you, and so on and so forth.
Let's talk a little bit more about that notion of impact, because on the surface, purpose-driven leadership is very philosophical, it's existential, but it's very practical as well. It makes sense. I think some people might be sort of turned off by it when they first hear about it because of that sort of philosophical nature, but it has, as you say, it has real impact.
Yeah, so it is actually a balance of the two, because it involves, it has an intellectual piece, and the intellectual piece is actually, it is an intellectual and emotional piece, which is, what is your purpose? And that's not actually an easy question to answer, at least for some of us. And for myself, that is true. I mean, at some levels, one can answer that question, but when it really matters, it's hard to really distill that. And in distilling purpose, there's an interplay. There's an interplay between, what these expansive ideas of what should the world look like? What is the scope of where my mind should go? And your mind should go wherever. There should be no limits on that, right? That's the existential part. That's the abstract part. Because in your mind, which is a starting point for purpose, there should be absolutely no limit for anyone. It is limitless. So then that always needs to be more and more expansive. But then tying that to, well, if it's purpose, it must have a result, at least for me. That is what I believe. If you have purpose, it must have a result. And when you get to the result part, it becomes very pragmatic and practical. So one of the exciting things about purpose-driven leadership is the permission to actually go back and forth between these really abstract ideas, these expansive ideas where you push your mind to go beyond any barriers you yourself have put in, but to really hold yourself accountable to some very practical things. I want everyone to be healthy in the world forever and forever, with not a question asked. That's an expansive vision. And then the practical is, well, what does that purpose look like in my life today? So I think that interplay is actually, I used to get frustrated by it, and now I embrace it. And I think, well, this is the work, and this is the joy, is going back and forth and not being frustrated by the fact that you have to push yourself on both dimensions. Because sometimes when you're really focused on the practical and holding yourself accountable in real life, you actually forget to go expansive. And when someone else goes expansive, it's an irritating moment. You're like, well, if I had the time, I'd be expansive too. It's like, no, actually, you can create the time to do that. And so I think instead of it being sort of a frustrating tension, primarily, more recently, I've grown to embrace that tension between allowing my mind to go to where it must without boundaries, while getting harder and harder on myself around, well, what did you achieve? What was actually achieved by through this leadership, through the power and the privilege that you have?
So the back and forth, this is a really interesting way that you describe it, that sort of accountability. Is it the back and forth between the vision and the tactic, or the strategy and the sort of the actual making it happen? So yeah,
but there's an interesting intermediate step that and this is partly why I struggle with the word leadership, because it's such an individualistic word. It's a
right
challenge. I think everyone's a leader, but in being a leader isn't always all that important either. Doing the work is important. Right. But the great thing about that interaction between kind of the vision and then your own place of accountability is it forces you to look at this intermediate space, right? So if you think there are different planes of action, they're literally different dimensional systems, right? Expansive vision is a multidimensional whatever, and then your own place of action and impact has a particular dimensionality. But there's a whole dimensionality in the middle, which is everything that's needed to solve the problem. And what that does is it also forces you to then have a humility around your own place in it. So it isn't just expansive vision and then what I can do. It's expansive vision and what people are doing, and then what can I do? And I really, going from enjoying the back and forth between expansive to my place of accountability has also opened up that intermediate dimensionality, which allows me to proactively seek out, embrace, and understand that half of the vision is what everyone else who's brilliant on the ground, living a lived experience, living through things and showing their leadership, what they are doing. What can I learn? What can I contribute to that while I also have my place of action?
Yeah. Okay. So what is your purpose? So how would you articulate your purpose and how do you apply it to your work and your life?
So my broadest sense of purpose is really around my contribution to what human beings can achieve. That's probably the most expansive version of it. I have come to that in different ways because of some of my own personal background. Some of it was very human rights focused around impact around people in various sort of political violence, but really looking at fundamental structures of human rights. That's growing up. Then it also had some fun moments around individual not keeping people in boxes, making that our society shouldn't constrain what any one individual can or should do. And then that thread is actually that goes through everything. And today, where I my little version of that vision is around health and being healthy. But being healthy also means being able to define your own purpose, your own boundaries, your own what you achieve. And so my purpose is to support every single human being doing everything that their hearts and minds would want them to do. And then that then takes me to all of the places we have to work to allow that to happen. So that's the broader sense of vision. And then, given my particular place of power and privilege, well, what are they? I'm a scientist. I come with tools. I am associated with a very powerful institution, academic medicine in general, university, academia in general. I have a position of power in that institution, at Del Med, for example. And how can I use all of that? I have people that call me for leadership conversations. These are all, positions of power and privilege. So then how can I use that to really support this expansive notion of people being the healthiest that they can be, being as creative as they wish to be, and creating their own individual impact to the extent that they want to and can.
It's one thing I think is important for people who may be hearing about purpose-driven leadership right now is, and I think that what you just said, it illustrates it, is how beautiful it can be. It's not, there aren't too many other leadership theories or principles that sort of capture that real sense of life, and there is a real beauty to it. So on a practical sense, what should a purpose-driven leader be asking herself and the people that she works with? Like, what kind of questions?
Yeah. So let's go. I'll do two. One I'll do sort of as in finding your own purpose, because that's actually the heart of this. Is first getting clearer and clearer, and anyone might still be finding their own purpose. You could be the president of the United States, and people might think you know your purpose, but no, you might still be finding your purpose. So I think that's just something we all enter in different ways. And I remember, I remember just how much we are constrained in our thinking by default notions of what's possible in defining our purpose. So, for example, as I was coming to Austin and making my decision about whether I would move our family to build this new academic medical center, really embrace the community vision of a community-anchored medical school here in Austin and at UT. I had many conversations with some of my colleagues and mentors at UCSF, and one, Josh Adler, was the CMO of the big hospital system in San Francisco, and I was talking to him, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was thinking, and he said, "Well, so do you want to, this was for a vice dean position. He said, do you want to be dean?" And I said, "No, I couldn't be dean because I'm a PhD neuroscientist, and you don't have PhD neuroscientists become deans of medical schools." And he just stopped me right there, and he said, "That's not what I asked you. I said, do you want to be dean? The first thing you've got to decide is, do you want to be dean? And then we'll figure out how to get there." Now, this is not some expansive vision of purpose, but it is actually an example of how at every step of the way, we second guess ourselves too early and too soon. So then I thought about it. I said, no, I actually don't want to be dean. And I had a variety of, reasons for it, but I'd never given myself permission to even ask that. And in asking, and then in that moment saying, no, I don't think that I want to be dean for these reasons, it also forced to open the questions of, well, if I'm going to help set up this new academic medical center, then what is it that I want to do? And so that put me on a path to thinking more clearly about what I want to achieve and what's necessary and what steps are going to be necessary to achieve that. So that's the first is really to invest time in getting clearer about one's own purpose. And sometimes that's done through very tactical means about a position or the next step of sort of the next platform that one needs, or and then other times it's more expansive. And then I would say the second piece is around, understanding what you need to achieve the impact that you've identified your purpose. You want to be a leader, and now starting to put together the pieces of, well, what do you need to really create that impact that inspired one to try to lead in something? So I'd say that's the second piece.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought, because for a lot of people, they're looking at the system or the structure that they may assume it is in place, and sometimes it's true, that is prohibiting them from realizing where they want to be. And purpose-driven leadership can make you question that and say, is that reality? Is that an actual obstacle? That's a great anecdote. Talk to us. We started with this when you were talking about your leadership weakness. So let's talk about a little bit more about how empathy plays into purpose-driven leadership and the importance of empathy with purpose-driven leadership.
Well, I mean, again, to be frank, some of my worst moments are where I can see something and it's frustrating to, I'm sorry, are you hearing this noise on the outside?
A little bit.
Is it okay? All right.
It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah.
All right, great. They're doing some work outside. So I think it can be frustrating when a picture that you're seeing in your head is not seen immediately by people around you. That's a very sort of self-involved way of describing the situation. I think that is if I stuck with just that interpretation, then I would be in trouble as a leader, and I frankly could not be able to lead. And so that has to be converted to, what is everybody else around me seeing? Let's find a way to better expose some of what I'm seeing in my head, so that not only the positives of what I'm seeing in my head are shared, but also the potential holes are identified by those around me. And so, and then you're hearing me talk about those around me. So that's another really critical part. you aren't a leader in a vacuum. You're always a leader in a context with people, with circles of people that teach you. Maybe you've got something to provide to them. And so not being able to meet people where they're at is actually devastating. It means you can get nothing done.
Right.
It means you haven't learned. And also, if there's anything you've had to contribute, you just missed that opportunity. So empathy around really understanding where people are coming from and engaging with an idea is absolutely critical to first validate the idea, or to change it, or to morph it to something that benefits from everyone else's ideas, but then also to sort of promote it.
So I think you've covered this already, but I just want to see if there's anything you might want to add for people who are considering or curious about trying purpose-driven leadership. Are there some practical ways that they can move forward with sort of discovering their purpose? As I say, you covered some of this already, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think another piece is, I talked about going to someone when I was at a career change moment to get some specific input. But I wouldn't underestimate the importance of the people around you and reflecting to you what perhaps your strengths are, what your purpose could be, because sometimes when you're in it, you don't get it yourself. So seek out friends, seek out people who are in your circle, and get their input on their lens on you. And interestingly, they see things sometimes that's hard for you to see by yourself. So I've really found that over various stages in getting input, sometimes hard input, sometimes very, sometimes easier input. It's been really helpful to hear from people that know me, and in the same way I would encourage others to seek that input from those in their circle to help clarify purpose.
And I would say too, along those lines, make sure that you're not just going to people who are going to tell you what you want to hear.
Well, yes, I mean, one of my main, I remember this moment so clearly. I have a very dear friend of mine who is now based in the UK, and I met her after a year, and this was some time back, and at that moment I was in a space where I felt I was bemoaning a whole bunch of things about hurdles in front of me and barriers that were not of my making, and all of which there are societal issues. Don't get me wrong, we must address those, and structural issues, etc. But here I was, and she just looked at me, and we were having coffee, and I really needed her empathy. But in that moment, she just turned around, she's like, I really don't know what you're talking about. This is kind of a little annoying, because look at you, you have all of this power, and I really just don't understand what you're on about. And I was really upset, because man, I'd been waiting 1 year for this conversation, because she was the one that was going to understand and all of this stuff. And she just literally pulled the rug out of me. And so I was annoyed in the moment, not happy that I didn't get the empathy that I thought I needed. But very quickly, as you can guess, she was just right. Yeah. And I needed someone like her to just put that mirror on me. And it was a really important turning point. It literally was the moment where I was like, absolutely, she's right. What am I talking about? And I have every possible resource and strength available to me, and that's all I should be focused on.
That's great. So we're at time. So let's quickly go into our standard closing here, where the first question is just what are you currently reading? I suspect you're reading a lot, but are there one or two books that you would enjoying or would recommend?
Well, I mean, one that I would really recommend is a recent book by an astrophysicist named Chanda Prescott-Weinstein. And she is this amazing multiracial woman who's now an astrophysicist. And this book, though, it's called The Disordered Cosmos, and it intersects both her love for astrophysics and the universe and all of those expansive ideas with her path as a young Black girl growing up, and where no one expected her to do this. at every single stage. No structural element in the world expected her to do this, and yet she found her path. And then so she's in a great position to reflect not only on the beauty of this expansive vision of the universe, but on also how we as a society go out of our way to make sure that people don't in fact do everything that they're capable of. And so that both inspires my purpose, but also, I'm inspired by the story about the resilience, also so much for me to learn. There are so many details there that I don't understand about the lived experience of this other amazing leader. So I would highly recommend that book.
That sounds amazing. Disorder of Cosmos?
The Disordered Cosmos.
Oh, Disordered Cosmos. Great. What was the hardest thing that you have ever had to do as a leader?
Give up my power. And it's still hard if I have to be really honest. And what does that mean? Because I need to make that real.
Yeah. It
means for me, each person is different. But being right is really important to me. And I'm being frank about this. This is, I'm a scientist. My whole background is about being right, being smart, having the right answer. That's my training. It's what I value. And giving up my power means telling myself that even when I really believe I'm right, to let it go, to hear other people's versions of what right is before I come back in a hopefully better place to create a more shared sense of right. So this shows up with partners in the work that we're doing in health. It shows up in a myriad places, but among many other things, I would say that's probably the hardest thing for me to do as a leader.
Great. Last question. Give us 2 key pieces of leadership advice.
I think, the first is get clear about what your purpose is. And it's not easy. But invest energy in clarity, in understanding. It is absolutely worth it. It gives you many rewards. So I think that is probably the most critical. And then the other is resilience, and just know that, as hard as things might be in achieving your dream, life is much harder for every other person, or for most people. It really is for most of us. So there's always somebody somewhere for whom things are harder, who are trying to be leaders themselves, but in much tougher circumstances. So that's the other thing I'd say is, develop your resilience by always reminding yourself about everyone else who has to go through much worse, many bigger hurdles than you are going through.
I love it. Dr. Kahlon, thank you so much for joining us. I encourage everyone to look up some of the talks that Dr. Kahlon does. She's an amazing public speaker, very powerful, great storyteller. She has a TED Talk. So please look her up, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope I can see you sometime again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emil, for this opportunity.
Bye-bye.